Hello, and welcome back to our lifelong learning series. My name is Sarah Drysdale, Family and Consumer Sciences Agent for Ballard County. And in today's episode, we're talking about houseplants.
Let's dive into houseplants. Our objectives today are to learn the basic indoor care of plants, understanding the environmental factors for healthy plant growth, and the benefits of plants, not only what we can do for the plants, but what plants can do for us. So let me plant some fun facts on you. Did you know that most houseplants have their roots in tropical or subtropical regions? They are used to growing underneath the canopies of the tall trees, which explains why that they acclimate into our living so easily underneath our shady roofs. The practice of growing plants indoors actually began in ancient times. It was very common in ancient Egypt and Chinese civilizations to have big pots that had outdoor plants in them for indoor outdoor settings as throughout their homes. But houseplants gained their popularity and momentum in the 17th century when an English agriculturalist named Sir Hugh Platt wrote about the possibilities of cultivating plants indoors. So, afterwards, glass houses or the modern day greenhouse became very popular across England as people grew their tropical plants indoors. Plants reduce noise pollution. So, if you walk into a big lobby or a hotel, you see that they have plants kind of sitting in random spots. Well, those aren't actually random, they're there for a purpose. So, some plants will absorb the noise of people walking across the floor, suitcases rolling, and carts. And it's a natural noise barrier to kind of absorb some of that vibrations from going all over a room. So, for example, the peace lily absorbs electromagnetic radiation that emits from our computers or our smart TVs, and it keeps our air moisturized. And that's a pretty neat fact about a peace lily. So keep one close to your TV if you're worried about the electromagnetic radiations. So plants balance the humidity. So when plants are in close proximity to one another, they can actually regulate and create their own environment called a microenvironment. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we get into the presentation. But plants can help balance out our humidity in our homes too, not just the relative humidity near each other, but an entire room. And indoor plants enjoy music. So you and I, we have ears. So we enjoy music pretty well because of the sound. You wouldn't think that a plant would enjoy music, but it actually does. Research has shown that plants that have more upbeat tunes and higher vibrations can increase their photosynthesis and plant growth 2 times quicker than an ordinary plant that doesn't get music at all. So let's talk about some common house plants. So there are many types of plants that you can use for indoor care, and there are many more than what I have listed on the screen, but some common household plants are included, but not limited to cacti and succulents, a cast iron plant, a Chinese money plant, a peace lily, a spider plant, a zebra plant, a ZZ plant, a snake plant, Swiss cheese plant, a jade plant, an umbrella plant, devil's ivy, English ivy, peacock plant, string of hearts, rubber plant, dragon tree, flamingo flower, and moth orchid. And these are just some of the more common types of houseplants that people have in their homes. So let's talk about the reason we're here. To learn how to be a successful indoor gardener, we have to know what goes into gardening our plants. So these are the factors that we're going to discuss when it comes to indoor plant care: light, temperature, humidity, watering, soil, and fertilizing and repotting. And the two up top, lighting and temperature, are the two most important factors. You would think it's watering because you'd think the plant needs water to survive. While it does need water to survive, it also needs adequate lighting and proper temperature to have healthy plant growth. So let's start with lighting. So this is perhaps the biggest environmental factor when it comes to your plant care. Without adequate lighting, your plant can decline very quickly. An example of this would be if you have a plant that's 1 foot away from your window. It receives what is called 100 candle foots light. So this is the light that comes through your window from the sun or any other type of lighting source. It's measured in foot candles light. So a plant that is 1 foot away from the window receives 100 foot candles light from the sun or light source. If it is 2 feet away, it only gets 25 foot candles light. If it is 3 feet away, only 11 foot candles light. And I don't know about you all, but there are very few houseplants that do very well in low light. They have to have some type of direct lighting source than none at all. So we want to try to move our plants closer to a light source. Some ways to increase light intensity include moving your plant to a lighter room. So thinking about your southern facing windows versus your northern facing windows of exposure. If you don't have a lot of natural light in your home, you can always create your own by placing your plant near an electric light or some other type of artificial light like a sun lamp. Now we have to be careful because we don't want to overexpose our plant to too much light either. There's a fine line between too much and just enough. Your plant doesn't always need direct light, whether it is sunlight or artificial light. And most of the time we've got light intensities that come through and bounce off our windows to kind of help give the plant more light for their photosynthesis. But the most important thing is we don't want our plant to get sunburned. Our plants, just like us, can get sunburned if they have too much exposure to the sun. So one way to kind of reduce the risk of your plant getting too much sun is by placing a lace curtain between the plant and the window to help reduce that reflective light that could come through. And always, you have to move your plant when the seasons change. So in the picture we've got here, we've got two suns. We've got the summer sun and the winter sun, and we have two plants. So my plant that's closest to the window gets all that summer sun, but it doesn't get any of the winter sun. The same thing with my plant that's placed farther back. It gets all the sun in the winter, but none of the sun in the summer. So we have to move our plant to get more of that natural light when the seasons change. Temperature. It's the second most important factor. So this influences the plant's growth in an interior environment. We as people are pretty comfortable in a range between 72 degrees and 82 degrees. Some of us like it a little warmer, some of us like it a little cooler. It's the same thing with our plants. Indoor plants can tolerate and grow well with a range of 58 degrees to 86 degrees. And that's because most of our indoor plants derive from those tropical and subtropical climates like we talked about in our fun facts. So some of our plants thrive in cooler temperatures. An example of this would be the wonder plant. It likes to thrive and enjoy temperatures at night between low 50s and mid 60s in the morning. So it likes it between 50 and 60 most of the time. That's where it really thrives well. But other plants thrive in warmer temperatures. This would be like our cast iron plant, and most of our ferns prefer temperatures around 72 degrees or warmer. So the best rule of thumb for your plants that are indoors is to keep your temperature in the daytime between 70 degrees to 80 degrees, and then turn that heat back at nighttime between 65 degrees to 70 degrees. Or if you just want a basic temperature to keep your house at all times for your plants, it would be between about 68 to 70 degrees is probably your best ideal temperature all day and all night for your plants. Humidity. Don't we all just love humidity? It's warm, it's sticky, makes our clothes stick to us in the summertime. Well, our plants really love humidity. So many plants require more humid climates than the average home can produce. There are some rooms in our home that have a higher humidity level than others. So the best places for your plants to have a more humid environment would be your kitchen or a bathroom or even your laundry room. That's where more of your humidity is because that's where you're doing more things. If you don't want to put your plant in the kitchen, the laundry room, or the bathroom, you can always place your plants closer together. So this creates that microenvironment. So plants that are set in a closer setting and proximity to one another really feed off of each other. With the light that comes in from the sun and the water that they have in their soil, it really helps them as they take in that carbon dioxide and release that oxygen to start feeding off of each other to create that microenvironment of humidity. Another thing that you can do is take a shallow container and fill the bottom with water, and then fill gravel on top of that and place the pots on top of the gravel. You don't want your pot to get wet. That's very important. You don't want your pot sitting in water. But what it is when it's in a room with good airflow and ventilation, the water will get heated up by the sun as it comes through and the airflow of your registers and create vapors to go up to the plant. And then the plant will take that humidity and it will flourish. Another thing you can use is a humidifier or a mist bottle, but use caution when using either one of these things. So water droplets can stay on the leaves of the plant longer if they don't get absorbed. Since it's more humid temperatures, the water will stay longer, and this can create the opportunity for disease spores or germlets to happen on your plant. And we don't want that because then your plant gets sick, and we don't want a sick plant. Watering. So everybody either waters their plant too much or doesn't water it enough. So when applying too much water to our plant, it can actually suffocate those roots of our plant, which causes root rot. And that will not allow your plant to grow as much. It will just kind of stay where it is. But not enough watering can cause our plant to become stunted in growth. So it won't get any bigger if you overwater it, and it won't get any bigger if you underwater it. So when we are watering our plant, we want to make sure that the container that our plant is in, our pot, has at least one drainage hole for excess water, because we want that excess water to kind of leave the plant. We don't want it to just sit there. So if you look at some of these really nice decorative pots that you can see at in the gardening section of some of your stores, some of them don't have drainage holes. Well, what happens is if you keep watering the plant and the water doesn't go anywhere, it just sits there at the bottom and isn't used, and that also can create root rot, which is not good for our plant. So we want to make sure that there is a drainage hole for excess water. So we have our drainage hole in our pot. Excess water comes out and it sits on a saucer. If it's indoors, it sits on something to catch that water because we don't want the water to go on the floor. Well, we want to get rid of that excess water. We don't want to have our pot sitting in that saucer full of water. While it will reabsorb that water, yes, it may not need to reabsorb that water because, again, too much water creates that root rot. And then another interesting fact is do not water your plants on a time schedule. Some people say you should water them on a time schedule. Some say whenever it's ready to have water, it'll let you know. The best rule of thumb is to allow the soil to become dry on the surface before you water again. So all the way from the center of where your plant is out to the edges needs to be dry. This method will maintain a good balance of air and water throughout your soil. And some plants require more watering than others. So move the plants that need more water into slightly larger pots with a greater water holding capacity, and other plants like our cacti and succulents need less watering, especially during the short days of the winter months. And room temperature water works best for watering all indoor plants. So soils and fertilizing. So potting soil differs from gardening soil. So good potting soil should contain a much higher proportion of coarse mineral particles to maintain sufficient pore spaces in the soil for air, water, and root growth. It must also have organic matter as to hold water and condition the soil to keep it from compacting on itself, because we don't want our soil to be all tight and dense. A good way to think about it is when you're making a sponge cake. You don't want your sponge cake to be all flat and dense and not have those air pockets in it. We don't want that. We want our soil to have those air pockets, just like we want our sponge cake to be light and fluffy. And potting soil must also contain sufficient mineral nutrients to supply a large part of the plant's needs. So we're talking about that root system underneath. That's a big part of our plant is underneath the soil, making sure that it gets enough nutrients. Yes, it needs water. Yes, it needs a little bit of air, but it really needs those nutrients that you can't find in your typical gardening soils. So the three most common types of soils for indoor plant is a general mixture soil, which is good for your container plants, your bedding plants, and your ivy. High organic mixture soils, which is good for your African violets, rubber plants, and other tropical foliage. And desert plant mix, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's for your cacti and other types of succulents. And you should fertilize your plants monthly with household or indoor plant fertilizer that you can buy at the store. And you can buy all of these mixtures in your local gardening section of your stores. Repotting. So the sign of healthy plant growth is that it needs to be repotted. So when repotting a plant, you need to check the condition of the container you're going to pot it in. So whenever potting or repotting, you need to note the following when selecting a new container. It's suitable for the plant's needs, suitable for the needs of the environment in which it's in, the strength and durability of your pot, because you don't want a flimsy pot or one that could crack easily, the drainage, because we have to have it at least one drainage hole, and the weight. We don't want one that's too flimsy, but we don't want one that's too heavy that we couldn't maneuver it if we needed to. So then we will just gently remove the plant from the pot that it's already in. We'll kind of crumble away at some of that soil because we don't need all that soil, but we need enough to keep it together in that root system. If necessary, we want to trim away some of those roots on our plant before repotting because sometimes our plant can get a little crazy with the roots. Sometimes when we have a bad hair day, the roots can be the same way on a plant. We just kind of want to trim them and shape them up just a little so they're not crazy going everywhere. Then we want to place the plant in the center or as center as you can in your pot and fill it with that potting soil that it needs. And we don't want to press or tamper down the soil, making it hard. Because remember, we still want to have that proper airflow and for the water to get through so there can be sufficient nutrients going to your root system. And then if you are reusing a pot, so say you had a plant in it before and you had to repot that plant, or it ended up in plant heaven just on its own, nobody killed it. We want to sterilize that container with a solution of 10% bleach and warm diluted water. And we want to rinse that well and clean it out before using it again on another plant. So our plants also need some additional care that are not the factors that go into healthy growth. Pruning. When is the best time to prune? As the old saying goes, when the knife is sharp. It just means using the natural life cycle of your plant as a guide. So say you have a plant that is a certain size right now and you don't want it to get any bigger, but you don't want it to get any smaller. You just kind of want to go and pick off those immature buds, leaves, and stalks that are kind of forming. And that process is called pinching. So we're just kind of keeping it at its same size, making sure it doesn't get any bigger as we go on. But we need to be careful when we're pinching because sometimes we can nick the stalk that's mature and that can kind of hurt the plant and make it not want to grow. But doing the process of pinching, it can actually help some of our more mature foliage to get a little stronger and fuller as we go on through the process. Grooming. So we just want to remove dead leaves regularly from our plant. We want to make sure there aren't any dead leaves, flowers, or any other thing in the soil because we want to keep our soil clear because this keeps the plant happy. And a clean plant is a healthy plant, and a healthy plant is a happy plant. Now, cleaning. So sometimes our plants can get a little dusty being inside. And so the best way to kind of combat this is to clean off the leaves with a damp sponge and just wipe it off, wipe the surface of the leaf off, and then take a dry paper towel to kind of get off that excess water because we don't want to have those water droplets not be absorbed. If you have smaller leaves or plants, you can always use a small paintbrush to kind of remove some of that dust or dirt that may be on the surface of your plant. And then summertime care. So houseplants actually benefit from a stint outdoors, but be careful because we don't want that plant to get sunburnt from all that direct sunlight. And then, of course, removing your dead leaves and grooming and pruning if necessary when you go outside to take care of your other plants. And at least once a month, maybe twice a month, lift and twist the pot to prevent the roots from growing through the drainage hole. And as fall approaches, you just want to move your plant back inside in stages because you don't want to shock the system of the plant and it kind of gets stressed out. So we just want to do it gradually in stages. So say we bring it into like a covered carport or garage at night and then take it back out during the day. And then as it gets colder, it stays in the garage all day, still getting light, and then bringing it back in before it freezes. Let's talk about some houseplant diseases. So, because homes have very low humidity and the watering often happens right at the soil and not on top of the foliage like when it would rain, the chances for disease to occur are minimal but are not impossible. So, there are three factors that must be present for disease to occur in a plant. So, a susceptible plant, a viable pathogen, and favorable environment. The most common problem that plants have are leaf spots. And these are usually not caused by disease, but however, some spots that have patterns are signs of disease. So this includes a tan center, dark borders, and or light colored borders called halos. Most importantly with this, you don't want to stress your plant out. So what causes a plant stress? Well, the most common stressor in a home, which creates favorable conditions for disease, are low lighting and overwatering. So, with low lighting and overwatering, you can get some of these leaf spots, like some bacterial leaf spots, viral leaf spots, or fungal spots. And the easiest way to combat these spots, if you see that they're present, is you want to remove your plant from other plants in your home. So, if your plants are close together in proximity, you want to move it away. You want to remove those leaves that look like they may have a disease in them, and you want to either throw them away or take them to get looked at to see what type of disease it might be, and then treat from that point. Another disease are soil-borne pathogens. So, soil-borne pathogens affect the plant at or below the soil line. The disease development is usually well underway before symptoms are noted on any other part of the plant above ground. So this is also caused when your plant is under stress, and there are high factors for this. And those factors, again, are low light and overwatering, create favorable conditions and environments for soil-borne pathogens to occur. Let's talk about houseplant insects. Everybody loves a good bug. In my opinion, a good bug is a dead bug. So to prevent or at least minimize pest issues on indoor plants, you need to choose the right plant if you are going and picking out a plant. So we need to thoroughly examine all parts of the plant and the container before bringing it home from the store or indoor for the winter time if we're transitioning back into that space. But if we're going and purchasing a plant and we don't want to repot immediately, we want to make sure that container is in good condition before bringing it home. And then as we're examining our plant, we may want to take a magnifying lens with us to look at the plant closer to see if there are small pests that could not be seen with just our eyes. And then proper plant care. So all of those factors that we've talked about before can help minimize pest issues and reduce the need for using chemicals, because over time using chemicals like pesticides can ultimately hurt the plant in the long run, and we don't want to hurt our plant. We want to have a happy, healthy plant. And as we're doing our grooming and our pruning and our cleaning of our plant, we want to examine regularly for insects. And if insects or pests are detected, we want to isolate that plant again from other plants and treat it before taking it back out to be with the other plants, because insects and disease can spread from plant to plant very quickly, and we want to isolate it and try not to get all of our plants infected. It's easier to treat one plant than, say, 5 plants. And the most important thing is water plants properly. Overwatering and poor drainage cause root rot, but it also encourages fungus gnats as well as other pests to make a home in your plant. The holiday season is coming up, and we will all be either giving or receiving some plants this season. So let's talk about some poinsettias. Poinsettias, when choosing a plant, you want to look for small, tightly clustered yellow buds in the center. Look for crisp, bright, undamaged foliage. If you happen to see some damaged foliage on your plant, you just kind of want to cut those off just because it may not be good for the plant in the long run. It doesn't look pretty, number one. Number two, you don't know if it's disease or not. You want to water the plant when it's dry and discard that excess water because we don't want it to sit in it. And we want to place in a room with bright natural sunlight. Ideally, it should get direct sunlight between 3 or more hours in the day. You want to keep it out of drafts, out of the way of any appliances, heat registers, radiators. And while everybody wants to look at their plant because it is beautiful, we do not want to place the plant on or near the television set. So some plants can absorb that electromagnetic radiation that comes through our TVs and our smart devices. This plant cannot do that. So we want to place it away from the television set because we don't want to harm it because it can't absorb it like other plants can. And then after a few weeks, we just fertilize it with ordinary houseplant fertilizer. Let's talk about holiday cacti. So a lot of people put holiday cacti under the term Christmas cactus, but actually most holiday cacti derive from the Thanksgiving cactus. The main difference between a Thanksgiving and Christmas cactus is the shape of their leaf stems. So if you look at your holiday cactus, if it's got sharp edges on the end of its leaves, it is a Thanksgiving cactus. If it has rounded edges on the end of its leaves, it is a Christmas cactus. So we want to avoid potting our holiday cactus in heavy mineral type soils, such as our gardening soils. Since it is a cacti, we want to kind of have it in that desert plant mixture more than anything. It needs light exposure for 9 hours and then in the dark for 15. So now that doesn't mean that we stick it up in a closet for 15 hours and forget about it. No, all that means is we just take it away from that light source. It can get indirect light, but it just doesn't need direct light. And it prefers cooler temperatures under 75 degrees Fahrenheit, but nothing lower than 50 degrees. And you can fertilize it each month with houseplant fertilizer. So let's talk about some unbelievable benefits of plants. We've talked about how we take care of plants and the benefits that we can do for the plants, but let's talk about what our plants can do for us. So houseplants reduce stress. So indoor plants have an amazing ability to relieve stress. Research has shown that we spend about 90% of our time indoors. Some of us spend a little more time indoors. Some of us spend a little less time indoors. But either way, we can have indoor contaminants and exposure to indoor environments that can compound over time into a lot of stress. Houseplants reduce that. It is shown to decrease our stress levels while improving our mental well-being and even physical well-being. Houseplants boost productivity. So when we are taking care of our plant, just doing our regular grooming and pruning, that's a task that we can check off a list. So that makes us more apt to do other things around our home or in our office space that we maybe not would have done if we hadn't have done something with our plant first. And houseplants remove air pollutants and allergens in our home. When you think about a houseplant, you often think about, it leaves dead leaves everywhere. It kind of creates a mess. Sometimes water gets on the floor. But these plants do a really great job of keeping our air clean. So taking in some of those pollutants and allergens to make our home cleaner. And that's how they get dust on their leaves most of the time, as they're taking in that carbon dioxide in our home and filtering out those allergens before releasing fresh oxygen. So let's leaf on this note. So we spend about 90% of our time indoors. And so houseplants can help create a very restful environment. And they just make things a little easier and a little brighter. And they are a very creative way to decorate our home. So I encourage you to go out and either get a house plant and set it somewhere in your home or add to your collection of house plants.